Story 1. The stranger on the shore. Last summer, my cousin and I rented a small beach house in North Carolina. It wasn't anything fancy, just 2 bedrooms, a little deck, and a short walk to the water. The kind of place people stay at to relax. The first night was calm. We made dinner, had a couple of drinks, and sat outside, listening to the ocean. Around midnight, I noticed something strange. A man was standing near the shoreline, facing our house. He wasn't moving, just standing there. I pointed him out to my cousin, but when she looked, he was gone. Last summer, my cousin and I rented a beach house in North Carolina. It wasn't big or modern. It's 2 bedrooms, a wooden deck, and a narrow path that led straight to the ocean. The kind of place you'd expect to feel peaceful. At first, it was. The air smelled like salt. The sound of waves rolled endlessly in the background. I unpacked, cooked a small dinner, and sat on the deck watching the sun disappear behind the horizon. The house creaked faintly with every gust of wind, but it felt normal. When night fell, the beach grew darker than I expected. The moonlight barely touched the water. Out there, beyond the faint glow of the porch light, everything looked like a wall of black. It was unsettling how empty it seemed. I tried to shake it off. He laughed, told stories, even played music from my cousin's phone. But every few minutes, I caught myself staring out toward the shoreline. Something about the silence in that direction felt heavier than the rest of the night. Around midnight, I noticed it. It's a figure. It was standing just at the edge of the waterline, where the waves lapped at the sand. My first thought was that it might be a fisherman, or maybe another tourist taking a late walk. But the longer I looked, the stranger it seemed. The figure wasn't moving, not walking, not shifting, not even turning its head, just facing toward us, facing the house. I froze. The hair on my arms stood up instantly. I whispered my cousin's name, trying not to draw attention to what I was seeing. When she leaned over to look, I raised my finger to point. But in that exact second, the figure was gone. The shoreline was completely empty again. Did I imagine it? Was it just the shadow of a rock, or maybe a trick of a moonlight? My cousin laughed it off, but I could hear the nervousness in her voice. She told me I was probably tired, that I'd had a couple drinks, and maybe I was just seeing things, but deep down, I knew what I saw. The rest of the night, I couldn't relax. Every time the wind blew against the side of the house, I flinched. Every time the waves crashed a little harder. I wondered if it was masking another sound. Footsteps, maybe, moving closer. If the figure really was there, why was it standing so still? Why didn't it move when I noticed it? And, more importantly, why was it watching our house? The next night, it rained. The sound of waves, mixed with heavy drops against the roof, made the house feel even more isolated. At around 2 a.m., I heard soft knocks at the front door. Not banging, not frantic, just slow, deliberate taps. I froze, listening. My cousin was asleep in the other room, and I didn't want to wake her. The knocks continued, then stopped. When I finally worked up the courage to peek outside, there was no one there. Wet sand footprints leading from the beach up to our door. The second night at the beach house felt different from the start. Air was heavier, sticky with the kind of humidity that comes before a storm. By evening, the clouds had swallowed the sky, turning it dark, before the sun had even set. The sound of the ocean mixed with distant thunder, rolling low and constant, like it was warning us. When the rain started, it came down hard. The roof clattered with heavy drops, echoing through every room. The windows rattled with the wind. For the first time since we arrived, the house didn't feel cozy. It felt exposed. Lying in bed, I could hear everything. The storm, the creaks of the wooden frame, the faint rush of waves against the sand. Every sound layered over the next until I couldn't tell what was normal and what wasn't. That's when I heard it. Knocking. It wasn't a loud knock, not like someone desperate to get inside. It was slow, steady, a few seconds apart, like whoever it was didn't care if we answered. At first, I thought I imagined it. Maybe the storm was messing with my head. Okay. But then it came again. 3 dull taps against the front door. Okay. My heart immediately started pounding. Who would be out here in the middle of a storm? No. Why would they come to our house? I sat up in bed, holding my breath. My cousin was asleep in the next room, and I didn't want to wake her if this turned out to be nothing. Still, my pulse was racing. The knocks came again. This time, a little louder, deliberate, measured. I whispered my cousin's name, but she didn't stir. I considered waking her, but part of me didn't want to. Okay. If she was scared to, it would only make things worse. So I sat there in the dark, listening. The sound of water dripping from the roof, the hiss of wind through the cracks. Okay. Was someone really outside? Okay. Or was I losing it in the middle of the storm? I forced myself to stand. My legs felt stiff and shaky as I crept into the hallway. The wooden floor groaned under my feet, each step sounding too loud. The closer I got to the front door, the more certain I was. Someone was definitely there. Could see the faint outline of the door at the end of the hall, the porch light behind the frosted glass glowing faintly, and then another knock. This time, I was close enough to feel the vibration through the floorboards. Okay. I froze a few feet from the door. I didn't want to open it, didn't even want to look. But my curiosity, or maybe my fear, made me move closer. I leaned toward the peephole, my breath fogging the glass. My hand trembled on the doorknob, but when I looked, nothing. No figure, no movement. Just the storm and the shifting shadows of the rain. My stomach dropped. Where had the knocking come from? I opened the door, just a crack, just enough to look outside. The rain instantly hit my face, cold and sharp. The porch was empty. The yard was empty. The beach path was empty. But then I looked down. Footprints, wet, sandy footprints, pressed into the wood of the porch, leading straight from the beach, directly to our front door. My throat tightened. I scanned the shoreline, but no one was there. No shapes, no shadows, nothing but endless rain and waves. I shut the door quickly, locked it, and backed away. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe. Someone had been standing right there, knocking, waiting. Why hadn't I seen them when I looked? Where did they go? I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch, listening to the storm until the first trace of daylight finally broke through the windows. And even then, I couldn't shake the thought. What if the person wasn't gone? What if they were still out there, watching? On the third night, we both stayed up late, too uneasy to sleep. Around 1 a.m, I heard movement outside. My cousin whispered, "Don't look," but I couldn't help myself. Peeked through the curtain, and there he was, the same man from the beach, standing inches away from the window, rain dripping down his face, his eyes locked on ours. We screamed, and in that instant, he walked backwards slowly into the darkness, until he disappeared into the ocean waves. We left the house before sunrise and never went back. By the third night, we were both on edge. Neither of us wanted to admit it, but the beach house no longer felt like a vacation spot. It felt like a trap. We stayed up late that evening, talking in low voices, trying to convince each other that everything was fine. But every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the wind, made us jump. We left the lights on in the living room, even though it barely helped. Tia, the glow felt weak against the heavy, dark pressing at the windows. I kept checking the time. Midnight, then 12:30, then 1 a.m. That was when I heard it. Movement, not from inside the house, but outside, just beyond the walls. It was faint, but steady, like someone shifting their weight in wet sand. My cousin froze. Her eyes went wide, and she whispered, "Don't look." Why would she say that? What was she seeing? Or worse, what was she hearing that I wasn't? I tried to stay still, but curiosity got the better of me. Against every instinct, I walked toward the curtain by the living room window. My hand trembled as I pulled it back just a couple inches, and that's when I saw him. He was standing right there, inches away. The man from the beach. His face was pale, water dripping from his hair, sliding down over his lips and chin. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stared straight into my eyes. My stomach dropped. I felt cold all over, like the blood in my body stopped moving. I couldn't breathe. What was he doing there? Why our house? I wanted to step back, but my legs wouldn't move. His eyes locked onto mine, unblinking, filled with something I couldn't read. My cousin finally saw him too. "Kana," she screamed, a raw, terrified sound that broke the silence of the storm outside. "Kana." In that exact moment, the man moved. Not toward us, not away quickly. He began walking backward. His steps were slow, deliberate, like he wasn't in any hurry, like he wanted us to watch him leave. The rain hit his shoulders and ran down his arms as he melted into the dark. Step by step, he drifted back toward the shoreline until his figure was just a shadow. We stood frozen, watching until he disappeared completely into the waves. It was as if the ocean swallowed him. Was he really gone? Or was he waiting in the dark where we couldn't see him? Neither of us slept the rest of the night. We sat together in silence, flinching at every noise, every shift of wind against the walls. The thought kept repeating in my head. He knew where we were. He knew when we were awake. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, we'd already made up our minds. We packed everything in silence, left the house before sunrise, not once daring to look back at the beach, because deep down we were both afraid of what we might see if we did. What if he was still standing there? What if he was waiting for us to come back? Story to the locked room. A few years ago, my friends and I rented a large beach house for a weekend getaway. It had 4 bedrooms, but one door upstairs was locked. The owner said it was a storage room and not to worry about it. The first night, everything was fine barbecue, drinks, loud music. But around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps pacing above my room. The problem was, the locked room was directly above me. A few years ago, my friends and I rented a large beach house for a weekend getaway. It sat right near the shoreline, with peeling white paint and a wide deck that faced the ocean. It wasn't modern or fancy, but it had character. When we walked in, the air smelled faintly of salt and wood, like the ocean had seeped into the walls. There were 4 bedrooms in total, each with old furniture and thin doors that creaked when you opened them. But upstairs, at the end of the hallway, one door was locked. The owner had told us it was a storage room and not to worry about it. At first, we didn't think much of it. The place was huge, and we were just there to relax. The first night, we grilled food outside on the deck, played loud music, and laughed late into the evening. The sound of the waves mixed with our voices, almost drowning them out. By the time midnight rolled around, we were exhausted from swimming, eating, and drinking. Everyone found a room and crashed quickly. The house grew quiet, except for the faint hum of the ocean outside. For a while, I actually felt safe. My room was directly below the locked one. It had a small bed, a desk in the corner, and a single window with a view of the water. The house creaked a little as it settled, but I brushed it off as normal. Around 3 in the morning, I woke up suddenly. At first, I didn't know why. I lay still, listening, trying to figure out what had disturbed me. The storm hadn't rolled in yet, and the night air was calm when I heard it. Footsteps. The sound was faint at first, but there was no mistaking it. Slow, steady footsteps pacing back and forth above my ceiling. My heart skipped a beat as I remembered the layout of the house. The room directly above mine was the locked storage room. No one was supposed to be in there. I froze under my blanket, listening. The footsteps moved across the floor, paused, then turned around and walked back, over and over again. It sounded like someone restless, pacing endlessly, Who could be up there? Was one of my friends playing a prank? Or was there actually someone inside that locked room? The more I thought about it, the more uneasy I felt. I wanted to tell myself it was just the house creaking, but I knew the difference. These weren't random pops of wood, okay? These were clear, heavy steps, and they were coming from directly above me. I considered waking one of my friends, but something inside me told me not to. Part of me didn't want them to think I was paranoid. The other part of me was afraid. Okay, if I spoke the words out loud, if I admitted what I was hearing, then it would make it real, okay? So I stayed in bed, frozen, staring at the ceiling, praying for the noise to stop. But it didn't. It just kept going. The pacing was slow, deliberate. Like whoever it was had no reason to hurry. Back and forth, the weight of each step pressing down on the old wooden boards. Sometimes the steps would stop for a long stretch of silence. I'd hold my breath, straining my ears, thinking maybe it was over. But just when I started to relax, the footsteps would start again, right above me. Was I the only one hearing this? Were my friends asleep through all of it? I thought about texting someone, but my phone was across the room, sitting on the desk. The idea of getting out of bed, walking across the floor, turning my back on the ceiling above, made my skin crawl. I stayed still, clutching the blanket like it would protect me. My ears burned from listening so hard. My chest felt tight. At one point, the footsteps stopped right above my bed. No pacing, no shifting, just stillness. My breath caught in my throat. Whoever was up there had stopped directly over me, as if they knew I was listening. I stared at the ceiling, heart hammering, waiting for something to happen. Keen, the silence stretched on and on until I thought I might lose my mind. Then, after what felt like forever, the steps began again, slowly fading toward the other side of the room. Kay didn't sleep the rest of the night. Kay, every time the floor creaked, every time the house shifted, I imagined someone moving above me. Kay, the light outside the window barely changed, the hours crawling by until morning finally came. As soon as the sun rose, I got out of bed and tried to act normal. My friends came downstairs, laughing and joking, like nothing had happened. I wanted to tell them. I wanted to ask if anyone else had heard footsteps in the night. But when I looked at their faces, carefree and relaxed, I stayed quiet. What if they hadn't heard anything? What if I was the only one? It would sound crazy. So I bit my tongue and tried to brush it off. Maybe it really was the house creaking. Maybe I had imagined it, but deep down, I knew better. Those weren't random noises. They were footsteps. Clear, heavy, human footsteps. Someone had been pacing in that locked room while the rest of us slept. Who could it have been? Kent? How had they gotten inside a room that was supposed to stay locked? The second night, one of my friends, Jason, joked that the owner probably hid something creepy inside that room. Later that night, when everyone else was asleep, I swear I heard whispering. It sounded like a woman, whispering fast, almost like she was pleading. I pressed my ear against the ceiling. The whispering stopped, and then 3 slow knocks directly on the floor above me. The second night started out calm enough. We had spent most of the day swimming, walking the beach, and eating way too much. By the time the sun set, all of us were tired, but still restless enough to hang around in the living room. The old house groaned every time the wind shifted, but we tried to ignore it. We told jokes, swapped stories, and killed time before heading upstairs. That's when my friend Jason brought up the locked room, smirked, and said something like, "I bet the owner's hiding something creepy in there." The rest of us laughed. There was a nervous edge to it. I could tell I was the only one unsettled by that locked door at the end of the hall. The more Jason joked about it, the more it seemed to plant itself in our minds. Eventually, the conversation fizzled out, but the unease stayed. It lingered in the air, even after we all split off to our rooms. Why did his joke stick with me so much? Why did the idea of something being hidden in there feel so believable? By midnight, the house had gone quiet. Our friends were all asleep, and the only sound was the faint hum of the waves outside. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, still thinking about Jason's joke. My room was hot, and the old fan in the corner barely helped. The stillness made every sound feel sharper, every creak feel louder. I shut my eyes, forcing myself to sleep, but that's when I heard it, whispering. At first, I thought it was one of my friends talking in their sleep. But as I listened closer, I realized the sound was coming from above me, from inside the locked room. My chest tightened as I strained to hear the words. It wasn't clear English, it wasn't clear at all, but it was fast, frantic, almost like someone pleading or begging. Was I really hearing this? Or was it just the wind playing tricks on me through the old walls? The more I listened, the clearer it became. It was definitely a woman's voice, low and fast, almost desperate, but muffled through the ceiling. I sat up, my pulse racing, and stared upward as if I could see through the wood. My hands shook as I swung my legs over the bed. Against my better judgment, I climbed onto the desk in the corner to get closer to the ceiling. I pressed my ear against it, hardly daring to breathe. The whispering grew sharper, still not fully clear, but enough to feel the emotion in it. Desperation, sadness, fear. My skin prickled all over. I felt like I was eavesdropping on something I wasn't supposed to hear. My heart raced in my chest as I tried to focus on the words, but before I could make sense of anything, it stopped. The silence hit me, so suddenly it made my ears ring. Why did it stop the moment I pressed my ear against the wood? Someone up there aware of me listening? I stayed frozen, my cheek against the ceiling, listening as hard as I could. For several long seconds, there was nothing but silence. Just when I thought I might have imagined it, the sound came. 3 slow knocks, right on the floor above me. I nearly fell off the desk. The knocks were heavy, deliberate, and spaced out. 1, 2, 3. They vibrated through the ceiling and rattled in my bones. My breath came in short, sharp bursts as I stumbled back to the bed. My body screamed at me to run, to get out of the house, but my legs felt heavy, like I was stuck in place. Who had knocked like that? Was it meant as a warning or a signal? I crawled under the blanket, even though I knew it was useless. My eyes darted around the dark corners of my room, waiting for something to happen. The house had gone dead quiet again. Not a single sound of movement above me. Not a whisper. Not a knock. Silence, pressing in on all sides. Minutes crawled by, but it felt like hours. Kept staring at the ceiling, expecting to hear another sound. Nothing came. My mind spun with possibilities. Could it have been one of my friends sneaking in there? No. The door was locked. We didn't have a key. And none of them had voices that sounded like what I heard. I thought about running to Jason's room, waking him up, telling him about what I had heard. But what would I even say? That I heard a woman whispering from inside a locked storage room. 3 knocks came from the ceiling above me. He'd laugh it off as me being paranoid, just like everyone else would. Or worse, what if I woke them and we all went upstairs, only to find nothing? What if the sound started again while we were standing there, listening? I didn't know if that would make it better or worse. Did the others hear it too and just stay quiet? Or was I the only one awake to notice? My ears kept straining for any sound, but eventually the silence lulled me into something between sleep and paranoia. I drifted in and out, jumping at every creak of the house, every gust of wind. At some point, I must have actually fallen asleep, because the next thing I remember was waking to daylight streaming through the window. The morning felt wrong. Everyone was cheerful, ready to head back down to the beach, laughing like nothing had happened. I sat there in silence, stirring my coffee, barely able to focus on their words. None of them mentioned hearing whispers. None of them mentioned knocks. If they did, they were pretending not to. So was I crazy? Had I dreamed the entire thing? But no. I could still hear it in my head. That fast, desperate whispering. Those 3 loud knocks. It wasn't a dream. It had been real. And that raised a terrifying question. If there really was someone in that locked room, then who locked them in? By the last night, we were all freaked out. Around midnight, the sound of the locked door handle jiggling woke us up. We stood in the hallway, watching it rattle like someone was inside, trying to get out. Suddenly, it stopped. When morning came, we told the owner about it. His response: he sighed and said, "That's why I keep it locked." He never explained further. The 3rd night was the worst. Neither of us could relax. We had spent the whole day trying to shake off the weird tension of the past 2 nights. The whispers, the knocks. The unease in that house never went away. When night came, it only got worse. My cousin and I sat in the living room, the lights dim, the sound of the rain hammering the windows. Neither of us wanted to admit we were scared, but I could see it in his face. We tried to distract ourselves with videos on his laptop, but our laughter sounded hollow in that house. Every creak from the ceiling made us pause. Every gust of wind rattling the glass made us jump. The storm outside was getting stronger, and with it, the walls of that old beach house seemed to close in tighter around us. By the time it hit midnight, we knew we weren't sleeping. We were too wired, too on edge. Why did it feel like something was building up? Like the house itself was waiting for something to happen. Around 1 in the morning, I finally heard it. Movement outside. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't branches scraping the glass. It was deliberate. Heavy footsteps sloshing through the soaked sand just outside the window. My cousin froze, his eyes wide. He whispered 2 words that sent a chill down my spine. "Don't look." But I couldn't stop myself. My curiosity got the better of me. I reached for the curtain with shaking fingers, pulling it back just enough to peek. That's when I saw him. It's the same man we had spotted on the beach the first night. He was standing right there, not even a foot from the glass. His face was pale, soaked from the rain. His eyes, they didn't blink. They didn't move. They were locked directly on mine. My entire body went cold. He didn't knock. He didn't speak. He just stood there, watching. His hair was plastered to his face, and the rainwater dripped slowly down his chin, soaking the front of his shirt. His breathing wasn't heavy. He was completely still, like a statue. And yet I could feel some strange pressure pushing down on me as I stared back at him. Why was he just standing there? Why didn't he move? I whispered to my cousin that someone was outside. He told me to shut the curtain, to stop looking, but I couldn't. My hands felt frozen in place. My cousin slowly leaned over, and when his eyes met the man's through the glass, he gasped. The man's lips curled into the faintest smile. Not a normal smile. A smile that didn't reach his eyes. We both screamed, breaking the silence of the house. At the sound, the man reacted, but not the way we expected. He didn't run. He didn't attack. He stepped backward. 1 step, then another, then another. His eyes never left ours. He kept walking in perfect, steady movements until the shadows of the storm swallowed him up. For a moment, we thought he was gone, but as the lightning flashed, we caught glimpses of him. Each strike lit him up against the backdrop of the beach. He was walking backward across the sand, his figure illuminated in quick, violent bursts of light, step by step until he reached the edge of the ocean. Then, without hesitation, he kept going. Who walks backward into the ocean in the middle of the night? The waves rose against his legs, but he didn't turn around. He just kept walking deeper. The water climbed to his waist, then his chest. Each flash of lightning showed him sinking farther and farther, his face still locked in our direction. Then, without a sound, he disappeared beneath the surface. We stood there in shock, staring at the rolling waves. The storm screamed against the glass, but nothing else moved outside. The man was gone, completely gone, but that made it worse. My cousin pulled me away from the window, both of us trembling, our breathing uneven. We knew there was no chance of sleeping now. Not after that. Was he trying to lure us outside? Or had we just witnessed something we weren't supposed to see? We sat on the couch, clutching each other like little kids, counting down the hours until sunrise. Every sound outside made us jump. One point, I swore I heard wet footsteps on the porch, pacing back and forth. My cousin refused to let me check again. He kept whispering over and over, "Don't look, don't look, okay?" Those last few hours felt endless, okay? The storm never slowed, and the house felt like it was shrinking around us, okay? I tried to convince myself that maybe we imagined him. Maybe stress and exhaustion were making us see things, but deep down, I knew the truth. We had both seen him, the same man, the same unblinking eyes, the same slow, unnatural smile. What was he? A person? A ghost? Something else entirely? The moment the first hint of light hit the horizon, we grabbed our bags. Neither of us spoke, just knew. We couldn't stay there another night. We left that beach house before the sun had fully risen, the storm still raging behind us. We didn't even look back, not once. But here's the part that still keeps me up at night. As we drove away, the rain finally started to let up. For the first time, I allowed myself to glance in the side mirror. And in that reflection, I swear I saw a figure standing on the beach, watching the road, watching us leave. So the question is, did he ever actually disappear into the waves? Or is he still out there waiting for me to come back? Story 3. The wrong beach house. This happened to my girlfriend and me 2 summers ago. We booked a tiny beach house through a listing online. Got there late at night, around 11 p.m. The house was unlocked and the keys were on the counter, just like the owner said. Everything looked fine to beds, some furniture, a little kitchen, but the house felt strange. It's like someone had just been there. The sheets weren't made, and there was half a glass of water on the table. This happened to my girlfriend and me 2 summers ago. We had been planning a quick weekend trip, just the 2 of us, somewhere quiet, somewhere cheap. We found this tiny beach house online, tucked away at the edge of a small town. The pictures made it look cozy, nothing fancy, just 2 beds, some furniture, and a little kitchen. It seemed perfect. The owner said he'd leave the keys on the counter and that we could come in late. We arrived around 11 p.m. The drive there had been long, dark, and empty. By the time we pulled up, we were both tired and just wanted to crash. The house sat alone, right on the edge of the sand. No neighbors close by. No lights except a porch light that flickered every now and then. The sound of the waves crashing was the only thing filling the silence. It should have been calming, but instead, it made my stomach tighten. Why did it feel so isolated? Did it feel like the darkness around that house was heavier than normal? We went inside, and sure enough, the door was unlocked. The keys were sitting on the kitchen counter, just like the owner promised. At first glance, everything seemed fine, but the more I looked, the more I noticed things that didn't add up. The sheets on the beds weren't made. There was half a glass of water sitting on the table, condensation still fresh on the glass. It didn't look like an untouched rental. It looked like someone had just stepped out for a moment. I remember my girlfriend asking if maybe the cleaner forgot to finish. I told her that had to be it, but my voice didn't sound convincing. The air inside the house felt thick, stale, but also lived in. It smelled faintly of salt water and something else, something I couldn't place. It's almost like sweat mixed with damp wood. I set our bags down and tried to laugh it off, but I kept glancing toward the hallway. The shadows there seemed darker than they should have been. Why did it feel like we had just walked into someone else's space? We moved through the rooms, trying to get comfortable. I switched on the small lamp in the living room, and the light barely lit up the space. The walls were bare except for one crooked picture frame of the beach, tilted slightly as if someone had bumped into it. The carpet was worn down, and the sound of our footsteps seemed louder than normal. Every creak echoed in the silence. My girlfriend went into the bathroom. I swear I heard the faint sound of movement coming from one of the bedrooms at the end of the hall. I froze. I waited for her to come back, and when she did, I asked if she had heard it too. She shook her head and told me I was imagining things, but the look in her eyes told me she felt it too. Something wasn't right. Was someone else inside that house with us? We decided to check the bedrooms together. The first one was empty, just a mattress on a bed frame. No sheets, nothing else. The second one had a bed with crumpled sheets, as if someone had just been lying in it. My girlfriend whispered that she didn't like this, and I couldn't argue. I pulled the curtains back from the window in that room, half expecting to see someone standing outside. But there was nothing, just a dark stretch of beach and the faint reflection of my own face in the glass. We tried to laugh about it, told ourselves it was just an old, poorly kept rental. But deep down, neither of us believed that. We unpacked a few things and decided to go to bed, even though the atmosphere made it almost impossible to relax. I lay there in the dark, listening to the waves, trying to drift off. But then I heard it again, a noise, not from outside, not from the ocean, from inside the house. What would you do if you heard footsteps in a house you thought was empty? It was faint, but distinct. The sound of weight shifting on the floorboards, slow, dragging steps. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I held my breath and turned to my girlfriend. She was wide awake too. She whispered, "Did you hear that?" I nodded slowly, gripping the sheets. Neither of us moved. The steps seemed to come from the living room, then stopped. Silence. I wanted to believe it was the old house settling. Or maybe the storm outside, making the walls creak. But I knew better. These were footsteps, heavy, human. I thought about calling out, but something inside me told me not to. Whoever was out there already knew we were here. So who was walking around in that house? The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Then, suddenly, we heard the faintest sound. Breathing. Not ours. It was coming from the hallway. Shallow, slow breaths, just outside the bedroom door. My girlfriend gripped my arm so tightly it hurt. I whispered that we needed to leave, but when I looked at the door, I realized something. We hadn't locked it. The doorknob shifted, slowly, quietly. At that moment, I jumped up, slammed it shut, and locked it. My girlfriend was already crying, her hands covering her mouth to muffle the sound. Whoever was outside stopped moving. Our silence was worse than the footsteps. Then, after what felt like an eternity, we heard the sound of retreating steps, slow, dragging, back down the hall, back into the living room. Did we just lock ourselves inside with someone who had the keys? We didn't sleep that night. We stayed in that locked room, listening, waiting. Every now and then, I thought I heard the faint sound of breathing again, coming from the other side of the wall. When the first light of morning finally came, we packed our things and left without saying a word. The glass of water was still on the table when we walked out, exactly the same as when we arrived. But when I closed the door, I glanced down at the doorknob. There were wet fingerprints on the metal, fresh ones, as if someone had been holding it all night, waiting for us to open the door. So I still wondered to this day, did we leave that house alone? Or did something follow us home? At around 1 a.m., I woke up to the sound of a door closing. My girlfriend was still asleep, but I swore I heard footsteps downstairs. I grabbed a kitchen knife and crept down. The glass of water was gone. The back door was cracked open, and wet footprints trailed across the floor, leading toward our bedroom. It was the second night in that beach house. My girlfriend and I had been on edge ever since the weird feeling of the first night. We told ourselves we were just being paranoid, that it was only the isolation, the storm, and the fact that the house felt so unlived in. But I couldn't shake the heaviness in the air. It was like the walls were breathing with us, watching, waiting. By the time we went to bed, the storm outside had only gotten worse. The rain hit the windows so hard it sounded like fingers drumming against the glass. The wind howled, and the old wood of the house groaned like it was under some kind of pressure. My girlfriend fell asleep beside me, but I couldn't. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, every sound amplified in my head. Why did I feel like someone else was awake in the house with us? Around 1 a.m., I heard it. The sharp sound of a door closing somewhere downstairs. Not the slam of wind blowing it shut. It was soft, careful, like someone easing it into place. My eyes flew open, and I held my breath, waiting for another sound. Seconds later, I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps, moving across the wooden floor below. My heart started hammering in my chest. I shook my girlfriend lightly, whispering her name, but she didn't stir. She was out cold. Part of me wanted to wake her, but another part of me didn't want her to panic. I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could and crept into the hallway, the sound of the storm muffling my movements. Would you have gone downstairs? Or would you have stayed locked in that room? I made my way to the kitchen, my pulse racing. On the counter, I saw the knife block. I grabbed one, gripping it so tightly my knuckles went white. I stood there, barely breathing, listening. The footsteps had stopped. The silence was worse than the sound itself. It felt like whoever was down there knew I was listening, knew I was awake. I forced myself forward, step by step, into the living room. The dim light from outside flashed in through the window with every strike of lightning. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The glass of water we had seen sitting untouched on the table the night before. It was gone. Not knocked over, not spilled, gone. Had someone been drinking from it while we slept? My breathing grew faster as I turned toward the back door, teeth which cracked open. The storm blew faint gusts of wet, salty air into the house, carrying with it the smell of ocean water. But what really froze me were the marks on the floor. Wet footprints, bare, human, leading from the back door across the living room, straight toward the hallway, toward the stairs, toward our bedroom. I followed the trail with my eyes, every muscle in my body tense. My girlfriend was still upstairs, asleep, completely unaware. I wanted to shout, to run, but fear held me in place. The prints were wide, heavy. Whoever made them wasn't small. The water from them glistened faintly in the light of another lightning strike, dripping slowly into the fibers of the carpet. How long had they been in the house before I woke up? I crept toward the door and pushed it closed, locking it quickly. The storm rattled the glass, but I barely heard it over the sound of my heartbeat. I turned back to the stairs, gripping the knife tighter, and started climbing one step at a time. Each creak of the wood beneath my feet felt like I was announcing myself. I strained my ears for any sign of movement above me. When I reached the top, I froze. The wet footprints didn't stop at the base of the stairs. They continued, one by one, up the staircase. Each step darker and wetter than the last. They led straight toward our bedroom door. Had they already been inside the room with her while I was downstairs? My hands shook as I reached for the doorknob, hesitated, listening. All I could hear was the faint sound of my girlfriend breathing inside. For a moment, relief washed over me. I slowly pushed the door open. She was still asleep, curled up on her side. The room looked empty, but the prints didn't stop at the door. They kept going. I followed them across the carpet. They moved to the far corner of the room, a place the shadows seemed to swallow completely. Stared into the darkness, straining my eyes, holding the knife out in front of me. Another flash of lightning filled the room for a split second, and in that moment, I swore I saw something. A figure, tall, motionless, facing the bed. Was I really seeing it? Or was it just a trick of the light? The room went dark again before I could be sure. I held my breath, every hair on my body standing on end. I wanted to run to my girlfriend to wake her, but I couldn't move. My legs felt like they were rooted to the floor. Another flash of lightning came, and this time the corner was empty. Nothing there, just the wet prints leading into it, and then stopping. Where had he gone? I backed away slowly, my chest tightening with panic. I didn't want to take my eyes off that corner, but I forced myself toward the bed, shook my girlfriend awake, whispering urgently. She woke up confused, frightened by the look on my face. I pointed to the floor, to the prints, but by then, they were fading. Carpet looked damp, but the shape of the feet was no longer clear. Did I really see someone in that room? Or had I lost it from lack of sleep? We sat there together, clutching each other in silence until the storm finally began to quiet down. Every sound made us jump. Every shadow felt like it was moving. By the time morning came, the footprints were completely gone, leaving only a faint dampness in the carpet fibers. The glass of water was still missing. But the thing I'll never forget came right as we were leaving that morning. I went to grab my shoes by the door, and when I picked them up, I noticed something beneath them. A small puddle of water. And beside it, one last footprint, fresh, facing the door. As if someone had been standing there, watching us leave. So I have to ask, did he ever actually leave that house? Or did he follow us out into the storm? We didn't sleep. At sunrise, we packed up to leave. On the way out, we ran into the real owner pulling into the driveway. He looked at us, confused, and said, "What are you doing inside my house?" We showed him the listing, but he shook his head. "This house isn't for rent," he said. "Never was. To this day, we don't know who set up the listing, or who was inside the house with us that night. We didn't sleep a single second that night. Not after the footsteps. Not after the door handle turned. We just sat there on the bed, staring into the shadows, waiting for something else to happen. Every gust of wind rattled the windows like fingernails scratching against glass. The old walls creaked and groaned, and every sound made me jump. The storm raged outside, but the silence inside the house was worse. By the time the sun finally started to rise. My girlfriend and I were already packed. We didn't even talk about it. We just moved quickly, stuffing our things back into bags, keeping the lights on as we went. The living room still smelled faintly of salt water. Damp spots dotted the carpet where the footprints had been. I didn't dare look at them too closely. Didn't want to know if they were still wet. How do you explain something like that? Kay, how do you explain footprints that vanish into shadows? Kay, we carried our bags to the door, both of us exhausted and shaken. The storm had died down a little, though the wind still whistled through the cracks. Kay, I remember my girlfriend saying under her breath, "Let's never come back here." I nodded without answering. My throat was dry, my hands still shaking from the night before. We opened the door, stepping out into the weak morning light. That's when I froze. A car was pulling into the driveway. It was an older sedan, and the man behind the wheel looked to be in his 60s. Gray hair, glasses, a button-down shirt. He parked slowly, then got out of the car, eyeing us with confusion. He didn't look angry. He looked bewildered. He asked in a calm but suspicious voice, "What are you doing inside my house?" For a second, I thought I misheard him. His house. My girlfriend and I exchanged a nervous glance. I quickly explained that we had rented the place online. I even pulled up the listing on my phone, showing him the pictures, the confirmation, the messages with the supposed owner. The man stared at it for a long time, then shook his head slowly. What he said next still makes my stomach twist to this day. "This house isn't for rent," he said flatly. His voice was steady, but his eyes were serious. It never was. My girlfriend's face went pale. I laughed nervously, insisting there had to be some mistake. But the man wasn't joking. He repeated it again. "This house has never been listed. No one is supposed to be inside." The words sank in like ice. My phone screen suddenly felt heavy in my hands. I scrolled through the listing again, my heart racing. It was all there. The photos, the details, the price, even the fake name of the so-called owner. But looking at it now, I realized something I hadn't noticed before. None of the pictures showed the inside clearly. Quick shots of the outside. Vague, blurry angles. Nothing that proved what the house really looked like. So who set that up? Who wanted us inside that place? I looked at the man again, trying to read him. He didn't seem like he was lying. If anything, he looked concerned. He stepped toward the front door, glancing past me into the living room. He froze, his face tightening just slightly, like he noticed something. His eyes lingered on the carpet, the faint wet marks still there. I saw him swallow hard before looking back at me. "I don't know who let you in," he said carefully. "I don't think you should leave right now." His tone had shifted. It wasn't just concern anymore. It was urgency. My girlfriend tugged on my arm, whispering that we needed to go. She didn't have to tell me twice. We hurried to the car, tossing our bags into the back seat without looking back. But even as I turned the key in ignition, I couldn't stop glancing at him. The way he stood there in the doorway, staring into the house like he was expecting something to come out. Like he knew something we didn't. Did he know what had been inside with us that night? We pulled away down the narrow road, the beach shrinking in the distance. My girlfriend kept asking if we had just been scammed, if someone had broken in and pretended to own the house. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. Scammers don't leave footprints. They don't stand in your bedroom corner, watching. They don't vanish into shadows. Halfway down the road, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The man was still standing outside the house, not moving, staring at the front door. The image burned into my mind. His shoulders stiff, his eyes locked on the entrance, as if he couldn't bring himself to go inside. If he was the real owner, why didn't he step in? We never reported it. We never argued with the booking site. We just wanted to forget it. But forgetting something like that is impossible. Every time I close my eyes, I see those footprints. I hear the sound of the door handle turning. I see that slow, unnatural smile pressed against the window on the last night. And sometimes, when I check the rental site out of morbid curiosity, I see it again. The same listing, same blurry pictures, same price. It keeps popping up, like someone is still trying to draw people in. So I wonder, was that house ever really empty? Or is someone still waiting inside, hoping the next guests will stay just long enough to meet them in the dark? After that night, I promised myself I would never go near that beach house again. My girlfriend and I had already driven hours away, trying to leave the nightmare behind. But the problem was, the fear didn't stay there. It followed me home, crawling into my thoughts at night. I kept hearing the sound of those footsteps in my head. My dreams replayed the door handle, slowly turning. Couldn't sleep without checking the locks 3 or 4 times. Sometimes I swore I could still hear the ocean waves outside my window. At first, I thought it was stress, trauma from what we went through, but things kept getting worse. One night, as I was brushing my teeth, I saw something move in the reflection of my bathroom mirror. A dark figure standing completely still behind me. I spun around, but the room was empty. I told myself it was just my tired brain, but deep down, I knew that wasn't the truth. I could feel something was still with me. My girlfriend tried to hide it, but she was going through the same thing. She'd wake up in the middle of the night, swearing she heard knocking at the window. Sometimes she'd start crying, saying she dreamed about that man standing in the corner of the beach house bedroom. She said his face wasn't human anymore. It's more like a shadow with hollow eyes. The more she told me, the more I realized we weren't just haunted by memories. Something had attached itself to us. A week later, it got worse. We started receiving phone calls from an unknown number. When I picked up, all I could hear was static. Then, a faint sound of waves crashing. The same waves we heard from the porch of that house. It made my skin crawl. Every time I hung up, it called again, until I finally turned my phone off. But later that night, the landline rang. And again, all I heard was waves and faint breathing. Finally, we decided to do the one thing we promised never to do. We went back. I told myself I needed closure. I needed to see the house one more time and prove to myself it was just a place, just wood and walls, nothing supernatural. The drive back felt heavier than before. My girlfriend barely spoke, just stared out the window, her hands trembling. So we pulled up to the house. The sight of it made my stomach twist. It looked darker than I remembered, like it had been waiting for us. We stepped inside, and the smell hit us immediately. Cupped, salty air, mixed with something rotting. The furniture looked older, dustier, like no one had set foot there in years. But the strangest part was the silence. No seagulls, no waves, no sound at all, like the house was sealed in a bubble. I walked slowly, my shoes creaking on the wood floor. My girlfriend whispered that she felt like someone was standing right behind us. We decided to split up just long enough to check the rooms. I don't know why I thought that was a good idea. Every shadow felt like it was moving. Every corner looked darker than it should have. In the upstairs bedroom, the same one we had tried to sleep in before, I found something new. On the wall, scratched deep into the paint, were the words, "You shouldn't have come back. The letters were jagged, like claws had carved them. My chest tightened, and I felt my breath shorten. Suddenly, from downstairs, I heard my girlfriend scream my name. I bolted down the staircase, my heart slamming in my chest. She was standing in the kitchen, pale as a ghost, pointing at the window. On the foggy glass, a handprint was smeared. T, not on the outside, on the inside. I grabbed her hand, and we backed away slowly. But before I could even think, the sound of heavy footsteps started upstairs where I had just been. Slow, deliberate, coming closer to the stairs.